event. Let's get ready to rumble!
That's right, the long-awaited Chapter 7 test review that you have been waiting for all weekend. Don't forget that for this review, you need to write everything on lined paper. That includes the word problems. We're only going to have a few of those, but you want to make sure that you're writing each of the examples and each of the steps for each example. Let's get ready to start. So the first set of problems that you're going to see, you'll see about 6 multiple choice problems where you have to solve the equation. It'll say find the solution of each equation. You'll also have 4 multiple choice answers. Now I want you to know that for the multiple choice answers, the wrong answer that's most commonly made is also going to be available. So you really do need to know how to solve the equation using the process because, for instance, if you're supposed to add and instead you accidentally subtract, the answer for the subtraction problem will be there as well. So let me show you what I mean. So here you see a problem, 25 plus x equals 50. Don't forget to write the problem down just as it is. Now I'm going to show you how to solve it. So the first thing you want to notice is that the x is on the left-hand side. Now you want to ask yourself, what's being done to x? Well, 25 is being added to it. So in order to undo that, you're going to subtract 25 from each side, just like this. Cross that out, and you are left with 75. Actually, let me do that in a different color. Whoops, sorry. So you are actually left with, x equals 25. Okay, and then I just want you to know, so this, again, the first 6 will be multiple choice. So your multiple choice answers that you could choose from, the possibilities would be like A would be 75, B might be 23, C might be, I don't know, 50, and D would be 25. So you want to make sure that you know exactly how to do the problem, and you want to make sure that you do each problem completely, because when you just look at it, if you think, oh, I need to add 25 to both sides, notice that the wrong answer of 75 is also there. So you want to make sure that you take your time on each problem. Okay, you want to make sure that you know how to solve problems that are subtraction as well. So x minus 15 equals 32. What's being done to x? Well, 15 is being subtracted from it. So that means we need to add 15 to both sides. So I should see your work right here, just like this. And then you get 5 plus 2 equals 7, and 3 plus 1 equals 4. So you're going to get a final answer here of x equals 47. You want to make sure you know how to do those. There are going to be problems that are addition and subtraction, but they also have decimals in them. You also want to make sure that you pay very close attention to lining up decimals and whole numbers. As you can see here, I've got the problem 15 equals x plus 3.6. So what you want to ask yourself, I know there's a decimal here and that can get a little crazy in your brain, but you just want to ask yourself the same question. What's the variable? The variable is x. What's being done to the variable? 3.6 is being added to it. So to undo that, we need to subtract 3.6 from both sides. This is what I mean. You need to be very careful. Notice how I put this 3 underneath the 5, because really see that little white decimal that I added for the 5? That's where the decimal is in a whole number. Now we're going to cross simplify that, and now we are left with the real problem, which is actually 15.0 minus 3.6. This is what I mean by lining up the decimals correctly. So now I'm going to change that into a 10. 10 minus 6 is going to give me 4. Bring my decimal down. Have to carry that over. 4 minus 3 is 1 and 1. So now I've got 11.4. So 11.4 equals x. Okay, so you just want to make sure you pay very, very close attention, because that's one that students often get wrong. All right, onward. The next type of problem that you're going to see is going to have fractions in it. So you want to make sure that you can work with fractions. So with this particular problem, and there will be a problem like this in the multiple choice section, with this particular problem you can see that you will need to subtract 1/3 from each side, but as you can see on the right hand side you have 5/6. So let's go ahead and see how we work this out. So we find the variable y, and we see that the variable is being added, 1/3 is being added to it. So to undo that, we are going to subtract 1/3 from both sides. So now we're going to cross simplify that, and I'm going to rewrite the problem for you so that you can see that it should be y equals 5/6 minus 1/3 because we subtracted 1/3 from each side. But if you notice, see this 6 right here, remember, we have to have a common denominator to be able to subtract fractions or add fractions. So now we need to say, okay, how do we get from 3 to 6? Because 6 is a common denominator between 3 and 6. So we would actually multiply by 2, okay? So then whatever we do on the bottom, we also have to do to the top. So we're going to multiply by 2 up here too. So 1 times 2 is 2. And now we're going to look at our new equation. So our new equation is going to be y equals 5/6 minus 2/6. And then we can see that we will get y equals 3/6. Now you want to make sure if it's something like this that you do actually simplify. So remember that last piece is just going to be to divide both the top and the bottom by 3, and you'll get 1/2. Sorry about that. So your final answer here would be equal to 1/2. And people are going to ask, do we need to check these? Yes, of course, you need to check all of these answers. I'm just going through this quickly so that you can see the entire review. You're also going to see questions that have the variable on the right-hand side. So that doesn't change anything. You still have to look and see what's being done to the variable. So let's go ahead and look at that. So for this problem, we have 13.7 equals x minus 5.5. So when you ask yourself, what's the variable? Well, the variable is x. What's being done to x? Well, 5.5 is being subtracted from x. So in order to undo that, we need to add 5.5. And remember, whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. And because we're working with decimals, we make sure to line up our decimal. So now we can cross that out. And over here, we've got 7 minus 5 is 2. I'm sorry, whoops. Sorry about that. We've got 7 plus 5 is 12. Hopefully you guys can tell that I'm a little under the weather today. So 5 plus 3 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And then we get 1 right here. So our final answer here is going to be 19.2 equals x. And then you would select that from the choices that were available. Now we're going to look at a few of the word problems that you're going to see on the quiz, or I'm sorry, on the test. The first problem says 1/4 of the watermelons in a garden are ripe. So let's go ahead and underline some of the important details. So first we can see that 1/4 of the watermelon in the garden are going to be ripe. Then it says if 8 watermelon are ripe, so that means 8 are ripe, which equation can be used to find the total number of watermelon in the garden? So what we're saying is that 1/4, and remember we learned to write that when we were doing the division section, so it's going to be, whoops, hold on one second. Sorry about that, and looked like my computer cut off the correct answer. So it says we learned to do that during the division section, and it was when we said 1/4 of something, that was similar to saying 1/4 of x, which is actually x divided by 4. So x divided by 4 is or equals 8, because it says if 8 of the watermelons are ripe. So the reason why this particular problem right here, this equation is not correct, is because that would be 4 times the number of watermelons. Okay, so I went ahead and fixed the problem completely. I apologize for that. Make sure that you've updated your answer choices. So now you can see all 4 answer choices here. Let's go ahead and look through this again. So it says 1/4 of the watermelons in the garden are ripe. Okay, so that means that 1/4 are ripe. All right, and then it says if 8 watermelons are ripe. So now what they're saying is 1/4 of the watermelons equals 8. Now remember, we're writing this as a division equation, so the way that we could actually see this is this 1 times 4 would give us W, divided by 4 equals 8. So now you can see that the answer to this particular equation would be A. Okay, so that's your division problem there. Now you want to look at the next word problem. It says Tina bought 2 pairs of jeans. Okay, so let's underline the important parts. We've got 2 pairs. If the total, remember the total cost of the jeans is $213.56, which equation can be used to find the cost of each pair of jeans? So we need to find out how much each pair is going to be. So if you think about it, the total is $213.56. So each pair would have to be less than that, okay? So for these problems, it's best to first identify what you're solving for. So remember that in this problem, x is going to be the cost of each pair, okay? So cost of each. All right, so let's go ahead and just think about that for a second. We could take B here and we could say, okay, if we have $213.56, that's the total, minus the cost of one of the pairs, would that give us 2? No, that wouldn't. So B doesn't work for us. Now we could say, okay, if we take the total for each pair, like let's say each pair is, I don't know, $100 roughly. So if we take 100 right here for C and we put it in there for X, we divide that by the total, would that give us 2? Nope, that doesn't work either. So now we need to look at these last two here. So we need to think, if we take 213.56, which is our total, and what would we have to do for A here to solve? Well, we would have to divide each side by 213.56, right? So that wouldn't really make sense either, because you would get some crazy fraction of a number. So you know that's not right either. So now you would be left with this D, but let's just go through and double check just to make sure that we have it correct. So if we have 2x equals 213.56, which remember it said our total was 213.56. And remember, oftentimes we see that the total is going to be by itself after the equal sign. So now what we would do is divide each side by 2, because that's what we would do in our operation here, and we would be left with x equals 100 and something. So 213.56 divided by 2. Now keep in mind, on the test you don't have to figure this out, you just have to match the correct equation. I'm just showing you what you would need to do just to make sure that you were correct. All right, so I came up with an answer of 106.78. And again, I want to reiterate, you don't have to work the problem out. What I'm showing you, though, is let's think about this logically. If we spent $213.56 on both pairs, we would need to divide that by 2 to find out how much each one is. But you would be looking for this multiplication problem, because how you would solve that would be to divide. So D is our correct answer here. Now we're going to look at this one. It says Tiffany is 132 centimeters tall. This is twice the height of her younger brother. So Tiffany is 128. Remember, that's the absolute that they gave us, equals twice the height of her brother. So her brother would be 2 times her brother. Okay? So now to solve this, we would just do divide by 2 on both sides. And we would get B equals 64. So our answer here would be 64 centimeters. On this problem, it says Tabari runs 10 miles more per week than his brother Xavier. So let's go ahead and first start by, okay, Tabari runs 10 miles more. Remember, more than, less than, greater than, fewer than. So we know it's going to be 10 miles more per week than his brother Xavier. So if we write X for Xavier, we know it's going to be X plus 10 equals something. Then it says if Tabari runs 27 miles per week, well, that's what we put there, our 27 miles per week. Which equation could be used to find the number of miles Xavier runs each week? Well, Xavier could be found by taking X plus 10 equals 27. So you can see that that is our answer here for C. So that would be correct. Now we have Bella is buying party favors. She has a budget of $1.25 a person for 9 friends. How much can she spend on favors? So for this problem, we need to think about it for a second, because in order to actually solve this problem in our brain, we would go, okay, if we have $1.25 each person, we have 9 people, we would multiply that. That's correct. But in order to figure out what type of equation this is going to be, because for this problem, notice there are no multiple choice answers, so you actually have to come up with the answer yourself. So or the equation and the answer yourself. So there'll be 2 lines for these types of problems. And remember, these are the most recently solved problems that we have. So if she has a budget of $1.25 a person, that means we can spend $1.25 on each person, equals the total, which would be the number of favors, divided by the 9 friends, equals that $1.25. Now, actually, I'm going to erase this really quickly and move it over. Okay, because remember in our division unit, you wanted to have the number of people. So this is the number of people down here. You wanted to have a certain number of a certain amount for the total party favors, and then over here, this is how much it's going to be for each person. So now what we would do to solve this problem is we would just multiply each side by the 9. So multiply, multiply. So now we would get F equals whatever $1.25 times 9 is. So 9 times 5 is 45, 18, 19, 20, 22, 9, 10, 11. And I believe we get $11.25. So we have a total budget of $11.25 for all of the people. Now, because this is a write and solve an equation problem, you would have 2 lines. On the first line, you're going to have F divided by 9 equals $1.25. And then on the next line, you'll have F equals, don't forget your dollar sign, $11.25. So both of these are your answers right here. All right, so on this problem it says Johnny gave his friend, there's that word gave his friend Tim 25 baseball cards and was left with 152 cards. So remember when we were solving these in class with the inquiry lab, we had 152, that was what was left all by itself. How many cards did he have originally? So for you to find the original amount, we'll say it's X, you would have to take X, which was the original, and subtract 25. The reason we know it's a subtraction problem is because of that word gave. So now you've come up with the first part of your problem. This would go on the first line. Then the second part of your problem, you're actually going to solve it. So X minus 25 equals 152. So your first step here would be then to add 25 to both sides because you're doing the inverse operation. And you are left with 7, 7, and 1. So the second part of your question is going to be X equals 177 cards. That's how many cards he had to start with. So these are your two answers that you would place on the line. This problem says, for every token spent, Toby receives 25 crackers to feed the giraffes. Toby has given 125 crackers to the giraffes. Write and solve an equation to find the number of tokens Reggie spent at the zoo. So for this problem, we need to think about it. If Reggie gets 25 crackers for every one token, we're going to say 25 times t, then he's actually thrown 125 crackers. So we can set it up as a multiplication equation like this, and then to solve for our answer, so first we would put a box around that and then put that on our number line, we would write 25t equals 125, and then to solve to find how many tokens he spent, we would divide each side by the 25, and then you would find out that he spent 25, so that would give us 5. He spent 5 tokens, and you would actually want to write 5 tokens. So that would be the number that goes on your next line. The next question says, Jason picked 112 strawberries at a farm. This is, so the 112 is, so that means that's how we know it's going to be 112 by itself. That's what it means when it says 112. So 112 is 25 more than the number of oranges he picked. So I'm going to use X equals the number of oranges, just because O isn't a good variable to use. So you have X, and it's 25 more than X. So X plus 25 equals 112. So on your line, you would first want to write your equation, because that is a 2-line question. Then you would want to write, okay, X plus 25 equals 112. And then you would solve that by doing the inverse operation. So whatever's being done to X, well, 25 is being added to X. So we need to subtract 25 from both sides. So we'll cross that out. And then over here we get, 75 would give us a whole 100, 87. So we'll be left with 87 here. So your total is going to be X equals 87 oranges. Again, you want to make sure that on your answer line you tell me what your variable is standing for, or what it stands for rather. All right, so in this next section, we've now covered all the word problems, so you're all set there. The next 9 problems on the test, and I won't go over 9 review problems, but the next 9 problems on the test are going to be solve each equation, and you won't have any multiple choice answers for this one. So I'm only going to go over a couple that are going to be different than the ones that I went over in the beginning. So for these, you want to make sure that you know how to solve equations that have fractions. So remember, the way that I taught you how to do that would be, right now you have X as your variable. So to get rid of that 1/3 that's attached to it, remember you need to multiply each side by the reciprocal, which would be 3/1. So that's how we get rid of what's happening on the bottom. So now we would cross simplify that, and now we are left with X, because it's just one X up there, equals 12. So that would be our final answer here, and you would want to make sure to check your answer to make sure that it was correct. You also want to make sure that you can solve equations like this one where you have a fraction on both sides. Now keep in mind it doesn't change how you solve the fraction, because remember, we're only really concerned with the X and what's being done to the X. So this is 1/3 times X. So we would actually divide both sides by 1/3, but because it's a fraction, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is going to be 3/1. So 3/1. Then we cross simplify all of this, and you're left with X over here equals 2 times 3, notice we get the 2 times 3 right here, that gives us 6. 7 times 1 gives us 7. So our final answer here would be X equals 6/7. So That's all there is to it. Just multiply each side by the reciprocal of the number that's attached to the variable. You also want to know how to solve problems like this. Now, I know that you're probably familiar with this, but again, we're going to apply that same concept we were just talking about with the fractions, because this is essentially just like a fraction. So in order to get rid of this divided by 6, on both sides we would simply multiply each side by 6 to get rid of the fraction on the bottom. And now you are left with x equals whatever 4 times 6 is, which is in fact 24. So you want to make sure that you do that. And then again, I haven't been showing you the check, but you want to make sure you do the check as well. The check looks like this. X divided by 6 equals 4. That's the original. Then we're going to do 24 divided by 6 equals 4. And then we're going to solve. 4, in fact, does equal 4. Check. So just like that. Now for these problems, you just want to make sure that you don't get caught up just because it's not going to be a nice pretty whole number. You still want to look, what's my variable? My variable is x. What's being done to x? Well, it's being multiplied by 2. So we're going to do the inverse or the opposite, which is to divide each side by 2. And for this one, we get x equals, well, 3 times 2 is 6, and then I still need my half. So it's going to be x equals 3.5. When you plug it back in over there for x, you should still get 3.5 on each side. So you just want to make sure you know how to do those. Good luck. I know that you can do this. Be sure to bring this review to class to turn in before the test. It will be collected and graded. I look forward to seeing you all on Monday or whatever day this happens to fall on.